Of all the courses that I took in college, those that fascinated me the most were those that dealt with communications. It's so interesting to look at our communications in a way where we begin to recognize that we bring to them our worldview, our story, our cultural upbringing, our biases, our hopes, our dreams, our expectations. All of that stuff is brought into communications. Now, there are a lot of nuances in how communication can be described, and I'm going to paint some pretty broad strokes in this video just for the sake of making my point. But I'm going to begin by looking at a newspaper, no longer a very common form of communication, but one in which people years ago picked it up. Some people still do today, picked it up, read it in the morning over coffee. They brought their perceptions, their worldviews into what they read. And so they could discern from reading this what it was meant to say based on how it was said and who said it. But it wasn't an interaction between two people. It was an interaction between the reader and that which is being read. A lot of Twitter posts these days are the same. A news story, a communication, an opinion is put out there only in word form. And what it means is left to the person reading it. And anything can be said. There are no rules as to what you can or cannot say. In fact, there were more rules with print media. Next in line would be a telephone conversation where you're talking to someone. There's a one-on-one interaction. You can hear the person's voice, and therefore you can pick up more subtle nuances of what they mean and how they feel than you can if you would just see that in print. And so that one-on-one exchange, that back and forth exchange, engages another sense. It engages our hearing. And when we use our hearing, we communicate on a different level than if we only read. If you take that one step further, if we look at during this pandemic how Zoom became so popular, we now have a long distance conversation. We can hear and we can see. We can see that person's facial expression, something we can't see on the phone. So in that conversation, it becomes a little bit more nuanced because you have more information coming to you based on their facial expressions, their body movements. All this speaks, right? The way they speak, whether they smile or frown. It's a deeper conversation. Now, if that same Zoom group is meeting in a classroom, in a small group, a group of people over coffee, you now can not only pick up on their nonverbal communication, you can see them, you can hear them, the interaction is expected, but you can also feel their energy. And people give off an energy, a sense energy. We can all think of times when all of a sudden we were around someone, nothing spoken, didn't even look at them. They could be standing right next to you and you could feel their energy. I think this is what we most missed out of the pandemic. And it's a tough thing to describe. But we as people give off an energy. Now, when you take that into a large group, a crowd, all the senses are amplified. We hear more, we see more, and the energy increases. One way of looking at this is to see yourself sitting in solitude in the desert. The energy seems to be absent, and so you're left with yourself. Okay? Which is why people can ponder so deeply in a desert experience. Now you move from the desert to the city, and there's so much to take in that sometimes we shut it all out. There's too much going on. But this is the power of the crowd. It is the power of the crowd. And the crowd is the real test of all those things that we bring to communication. Because when we're in our crowd, in a large crowd, we have choices. We can engage and become part of it, or we can resist. And resisting in a crowd is one of the hardest things to do. Because if you're resisting, why are you even there? So you want to let go of the anxiety, and so you go with the crowd. As I'm talking to you today, it's the weekend for Palm Sunday in the Christian tradition. And in the readings for today, we talk about the crowd. We talk about Jesus entering Jerusalem with his disciples. And some of them are waving palms and laying their cloaks down in front of him. He's coming in on a donkey, not like a king on a horse, but on a donkey. And they're treating him similar to how they would treat a king. They believe in him. They've seen his actions. They know what he is capable of. Their hopes and their expectations are that he is the Messiah. They're caught up in the energy given off by the disciples. But Jerusalem before Passover is packed with people. It is a bustling city. And the energy in that city was one of division. It was one of division between the ruling authority, the Romans, and the Jews. It was a city of division between the Jews themselves. And Jesus only added to the mess. And so the disciples who felt so sure of the way they believed or felt about Jesus and who he was were caught up into the crowd. And eventually, some of them would deny him. Some of them would join the crowd in shouting, "Crucify him!" And because of the power of the crowd, the energy of the crowd, more and more people abandoned their belief in Jesus until they came to the cross, and very few stood by him. In our reading for this Sunday, the gospel, they engage the congregation. And one of the things that they have the crowd do is shout, "Crucify him, crucify him." And so I ask you to ponder what that means to you. When you are in a crowd, do you tend to join the shout of the crowd, even though it may go against your deep belief? Or do you resist what the crowd is shouting? Do you strive to bring your beliefs to fruition despite what the crowd believes? Are you willing to take a stand? Or does fear of what might happen to you, prevent you from witnessing to the truth?